controversy. And then remember the deputy speaker just brought something about a memo. I didn't see it, but it speaks to the fact that if something is being debated, what did it say? The last point he just read says
that was a memo. That's a memo from yesterday. That was in the media, is it not?
I didn't hear it.
That's not a new memo. I thought that was what you referred to at the start.
No. I was
here in the public sphere.
No, I was talking to discussions that have taken place on programs, television programs.
Yeah, but I think it had to do with...
well, I didn't hear that. So, and I noticed he said certain things, and he asked a very important question as to how then are we going to deal with the situation in relation to the points raised in the memo. So my position here is not to be antagonistic. I'm not being adversarial. I'm saying to you, we have a parliament, we have standing committees, the law is dynamic, it changes. Where do we stand and how do we go? And I speak on behalf of members of my side. There is no attempt, because where there is corruption, it must be exposed, and I support that.
Member Campbell, and then Member Daly.
Thank you, Chairman. I hope that when we come to these committees that we'll get rid of the hyperboles, and we'll speak clearly to what we have before us. And let us examine dispassionately what it is we have before us and whether or not we're being faithful to that which is required of us under the present regime. I have no issue with what my friend has said in relation to 73. Those are the broad powers. 73A, that is, on the standing orders. No issue with 73A. That is what this committee is empowered to look at. And I agree with the clerk that when it is being read, it has to be read in conjunction with that which is set out in 77. And the most critical part of 77 is where it says the deliberations of a select committee.
Which one are you talking about?
77-7.
Oh, yeah.
And there was some toing and froing as to whether this committee is a sessional select committee or a select committee. And and let me at this point say, there is no ambiguity. There ought not to be any misunderstanding of what a sessional select committee is. If we roll back to 68, we have broadly select committees, and it says sessional select committees. I select all of these committees that we are looking at are select committees. Sessional, all that sessional means in this context is that if we start Parliament on January 1 and we're proroguing Parliament on December 31, that would be considered a session. In our climate, we use the 5-year or depending on when the elections are called. Yeah. So there's no issue as to whether this committee is a select committee. So okay.
It's a sessional, yes.
It's a select committee.
Absolutely.
Yeah, all the committees which operate, within the time frame of one election being called and a party first past post going to government, and there's an opposition. That period up to the point where Parliament is prorogued is a session. So we can accept that the Public Accounts and Appropriations, Public Administration and Appropriations Committee is a select committee. And so it is subject to the limitation placed on it in Standing Order 77.7. The deliberations of a select committee shall be, there is no may, and in this context, it's obligatory. Shall in this context is a command. We can't decide. The House cannot decide that it is going to make it other until it shall have amended that provision. This is mandatory. This is not something as appears under common law provision or otherwise, where for the efficacy or otherwise of a particular provision, you may give it the power to do something which should achieve the results which it is intended to. This is not a case. It is mandatory. So we can't go around it. And then we go further. It says confined to the matter referred to it. The question is, what is a referral? We are assisted in determining what a referral is. 77A. A matter may be referred to a select committee if, on the question being put, at least 16 members of the House so decide. My friend is mistaken when he seems to be saying that it is the government. No, this committee has nothing to do with government. It is a committee which is set up to examine witnesses when they come here, and for us not to express opinion on the evidence whilst it is being taken. Our obligation is set out further that we must file a report, meaning a single report, unless otherwise provided for, at the close of the session. And if we are not in a position so to do, the Speaker ought to be advised. That,
hold on, repeat that.
If we must file a report at the end of the session, this committee must file a report at the end of the session, and if we are not in a position to file the report, then we must so advise the Speaker. That is our obligation. So this is not an attempt to muzzle anyone. An obligation arises. It's placed on us, and we must do it in accordance with those rules. It is perhaps the time has come, Mr. Chairman, for us to take a very serious look, because I see clear deficiencies in these provisions. The time has come for us to refer these provisions to the House Committee. No problem with that. For us to have a more fulsome set of guidelines. For instance, what is the case when a particular witness appears and refuses to answer, when the committee needs the answer to be able to put it in a position? And we can go and look at the privileges regulations. It does not adequately deal with those situations when they arise. And I think that is the point where we're at, because I see us, when we call the Bank of Jamaica or any other entity, I'm yet to see a clearly defined set of guidelines for members to say to a witness, well, you, in your statement to us earlier, you said so and so. The time has come really where our Supreme Court and our highest judicial bodies, the Privy Council, is saying we ought not to ambush people. We must let them know what it is that they're coming here to answer. And those guidelines ought to be provided. The reference from the House, I would suggest, be crafted in such a manner that it would say something like, to inquire into the labor and industrial relations practices in Jamaica and to determine whether or not in the 21st century those meet the current needs. It has to, and whatever, if we are looking at financing, a different set of guidelines would be set out. But it cannot be that we come here and it's a sort of hodgepodge and we throw things and we're referencing constituency matters, and which in strict terms do not fall within the habit of the guidelines given to us. So it is really at best untidy. And I'd urge you, Mr. Chairman, to have, before we take any other matters, because as my friend has indicated, that having gone before a court with a matter where it clearly says, having been doing the thing for 40 years or thereabout, Section 10 of the Consolidated Force Act clearly tells you that civil documents ought not to be served by a police officer. And not because we have been doing it like this. If it is brought to your attention, your obligation is to consider it, give it serious consideration, and make a determination as to whether you have been going down the wrong path or not. And I respectfully suggest that we have been going down the wrong path, notwithstanding the fact that we have been doing it this way. Because our obligation must sit with the democratic process that we have established. We say things must be done a particular way. Let us do it the way, and if it is not achieving the purpose which is set out here, then let us amend and add regulations and perhaps a set of rules which would guide the committees at their hearings. Because, and my friend Member Jackson said that the reference which was sent by the memo which was sent relating to another committee, that all of these committees which are set out in Standing Order 68 have to abide Standing Order 77.7. So what applies to whether it is internal or external should apply to the PAAC. Unless I can be of any further guidance, Mr. Chairman, those are my comments, and I'd respectfully urge that we adjourn these proceedings and we come back, seek further guidance, and come back at a time when we can do the things in accordance with the rules. Thank you.
Member Daly.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman, I really sit here today and I'm wondering if our democracy is at any risk. I hope. Chairman, I came to this committee and I remember the very first time in the first period when I met with the IMF representative coming to Jamaica. They congratulated this parliament for setting up a committee of this nature to inspect, to examine, and to make sure that we have transparency and equity in all that we say and do in here. I personally agree with the members who believe that we need to refer back to the House because it is very frightening to me to see the kind of interpretations that we are now trying to make of this standing order in order for us to go forward. I personally believe we also need to have a retreat. But Mr. Chairman, I'm going to say something in here. I will not sit in any committee that I have a responsibility to make sure that we have transparency, equity, and also that we do not have any corruption in any matter, and sit here believing that there is anything that is going to muzzle me from asking questions that is relevant, pertinent to the matter, the subject matter that we have before us. I believe that we really need to have a retreat and we really need to refer back to the House, because I do not want to sit in any committee meeting and interpret what the bylaw says how we should govern. Thank you.
Member Terry Long.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. You know, Mr. Chairman, the rules of the standing orders seem pretty clear to me, and I agree with Member Dalrymple, who I have known as counsel for at least 18 years. I also agree with the observations of Member Campbell, who I've also known as counsel for 18 years. And, you know, Mr. Chairman, when we apply our legal interpretation of what is written before us, and even those who aren't trained in the law, Mr. Chairman, provided they are not guided by the need to inflame or to make statements that will somehow be sensational or will somehow seek to grab a headline. It is very clear from the reading of the standing orders what ought to prevail. And I won't go back into it because I believe Member Dalrymple and Member Campbell have elucidated very, very clearly what the law is and what, as relates to the provisions within the standing order. But, Mr. Chairman, I find it offensive to us as a committee when any member would seek to use words, and there seems to be a common thread and our common word. That common word this morning seems to be muzzle. And, you know, Mr. Chairman, it is very, very unfortunate that any member would seek to use that particular word, especially since we've been having robust discussions within this committee all the year. You know, Mr. Chairman, I have sat here, and in fact, Mr. Chairman, on one occasion, I had to petition to you, and we agreed that no member should speak for more than, we had said, maybe 5 minutes or 10 minutes, so that other members on the committee would be able to ask of our civil servants questions relating to examining the budget or monitoring the budget or inquiring into the administration of the government. And Mr. Chairman, I had to implore you, simply because there were some members who would speak for half an hour, 1 hour, and they would be there, and by the time you look around, Mr. Chairman, it is 1 o'clock. Other committee members, other civil servants are outside. They would have wasted their day. Mr. Chairman, when we have the civil servants here wasting their day, it slows up the business of governance because they're not able to do what they ought to do within their ministries, departments, or agencies. And so, Mr. Chairman, it is unfortunate that any member would say that they feel somehow that they're being muzzled or otherwise, Mr. Chairman, when it is that they have been allowed to free-rein right here. And, you know, Mr. Chairman, when we look back at 73A and what it is that we are supposed to do as the PAAC, Mr. Chairman, I recall on several occasions Member Campbell has drawn for the standing orders, and he has pointed out to this committee time and time again, how is it? How are we examining the budgetary expenditure of the government? based on some of the questions that we've been asking. And Mr. Chairman, I've seen civil servants dragged here time and time again. I have seen members of the committee insult them, Mr. Chairman. I have seen members of the committee get personal with them, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have seen and heard civil servants bemoan that they would ever have to come here to be insulted and treated as though, Mr. Chairman, they were any less than. And so I think that, you know, and I'm hearing about 20 years and all this. Mr. Chairman, maybe one of the things we really ought to consider as a government is limitation on parliamentary service. And I say that, Mr. Chairman, with the greatest of respect to everyone who has served in this House for be it 40 years or 30 years or 50 years, Mr. Chairman. I say the greatest of respect. But it seems to me, Mr. Chairman, that when you have parliamentarians sitting in the House for 40 years and 50 years, and things are being done in this way and this way and this way, Mr. Chairman, without any regard to how things ought to be done, then you find that matters can be dealt with in a very ad hoc way. Because clearly, Mr. Chairman, we have been conducting this committee in a very ad hoc way. And so, as Member Darling indicated, she was doing one thing for 40 years with no intent of changing, because this is what she accustomed to, this is what she used to, and this is the norm, and this is how it go, and it has gone so for the last 30 years. But, Mr. Chairman, at some point, we have to look at how we function as a parliament. You know, Mr. Chairman, when I became a member of parliament, I thought we'd be having robust discussions on national interest, you know, Mr. Chairman, even within the House itself. And Mr. Chairman, you come into the House and the quality of the debate is poor, things aren't being debated properly, and it just seems as if, I don't know, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, that high level, that high standard that you'd expect of a parliament, you know what I mean, discussing matters to really move not just issues of economic growth, but also social growth, Mr. Chairman. I don't find that we're tackling some of the social issues and everything to truly make Jamaica the great place it ought to be. And so, Mr. Chairman, for my part, I think that it is time we stop conducting the affairs of this committee in a very ad hoc way. I think it's time we stop insulting our civil servants. I think it's time we stop making everything so personal as it is to their private affairs and their family lives as well, Mr. Chairman. And certainly, my fellow member here said almost two things. On the one hand, yes, she agrees that the matter should be referred to the House and agreed to the retreat. And then on the other hand, expressing a concern. But Mr. Chairman, if it is that we are accepting on both sides that there should be this retreat and that matters should be referred to the House, Mr. Chairman, then certainly it is us as mature parliamentarians having a discussion, and there should be no talk of anybody being muzzled or democracy being at that stake, Mr. Chairman, because certainly we all enjoy living in a free Jamaica, and Mr. Chairman, nobody promotes democracy and the sense of democracy more than this administration, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
I'm done.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I think Member Daly started off by saying our democracy is possibly under threat, and I completely disagree with that. She mentioned the fact, and other members, including Member Jackson, mentioned the fact that we have so much to be thankful for our Prime Minister Bruce Golding for setting this committee. That is not democracy under threat. We are also thankful for the fact that we have always been having robust discussion in this committee and in this parliament. That is not a threat to democracy. So I urge you, Mr. Chairman, I urge you, sir, that you have conducted the affairs of this committee in a very even-handed way to most extent. However, I urge you that this matter needs to be sorted out, and therefore it must be referred to Parliament. And I'm imploring you, sir, to use your good office to adjourn the meeting today and to refer this matter to Parliament.
Of course. Come. You have something? Yeah, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I am looking at the booklet.
Standing order, sir.
Mr. Chairman, if you would ask the other members just to be quiet a minute so that I can complete my piece, please.
Members.
I'm looking at this booklet in my hand. It's a standing order of the House of Representatives of Jamaica, 1964. It says it was adopted by the House of Representatives on the 20th of May, 1964, and it serves us the amendment on many dates up to February, 24th of February, 2015. The one that I have said 2015. So if there's a 2016, I would love to see that one.
You told us 2016. At least you told us as MPs.
Right. Yeah, I understand, Mikhail. I understand his situation. We're very good friends. Mr. Chairman, all that we are speaking about today is embedded in the Constitution. The Constitution of this country, Mr. Chairman, is the highest order of laws. Mr. Chairman, I listened to my colleague, Cliff Fitzjackson. Member Fitzjackson made a comment earlier, and he made mention of not formally amended. Mr. Chairman, one of our problems, or what is happening today, is because we have been practicing and practicing for the past 20 years over successive government, and there has not been a formal amendment to all that has been practicing, Mr. Chairman. And therefore, now that we are at a point where we think, or person think that there is a crisis, we are now left in a quandary, Mr. Chairman, because we are left to whether we are going to accept the practice or are we going to accept the law. Mr. Chairman, in all that I've come to learn is that the law takes precedence over everything that is custom, that is practice, or that is even precedence. And therefore today, Mr. Chairman, before we are looked upon as just some, I don't want to use the word, Mr. Chairman, but let us be guided by the standing order of Jamaica 1964 with all the amendment dates, and do what is right today in the sight of God and the people of Jamaica. I know we are emotional about things, but let us remove the emotion from what we are doing today and do the right thing. Thank you.
Member Phillips.
Chairman, I am a little bit disappointed in my, I shouldn't say a little bit, I am disappointed in my government members on this committee. Yesterday at another committee, this matter was raised. Yeah? Now, I hear members speaking about responsibility, and if I'm to take us back at the beginning of this parliamentary period, where committees could not meet because chairmen could not be named. The format of having an opposition member chairing the committees came back from the period from 07 up. We have seen the value in having an opposition member chairing a committee. And I asked the question of my colleague here, Member Campbell, if we are not seeing the value, and despite what we are disagreeing with in the standing orders, if the outcome of the meetings is something of value not only to us in the Parliament but to the people of Jamaica, then why not then, as a member of the committee and a member of the House, seeing the shortcomings in the standing order, himself did not refer this to the Regulations Committee of Parliament. It is just another instance of trying to disturb the flow of the committees of Parliament. We have gone basically 3 quarters. We're starting the 3rd quarter and it is just now, just before the summer break, that other committees have been given the go-ahead to remain with the chairman that they currently have. Now, Mr. Chairman, what's going to end up happening is that we're going to go through a whole period where committees will not be able to sit. And I would have hoped that the members on the committee, especially those of the government, would have thought of the value of the oversight committees. You know, and Chairman, I want to express my disappointment, because week after week they have come here to try and stop the committee and committees from doing their work. And this is another ploy. Now, when we were in government and they were chairing the committees, those of us who have been on the PASC can say that we dealt with the ministries and agencies in a similar manner. What is obvious of many of the government members on the committee is that they do not read the reports when they come to them. So when they come, all they do is to come and try and defend in a manner that is not becoming of the committee itself. And when I hear members of the committee talking about their disappointment in the House, though that same member has never participated in a debate or submit a private member's motion to lift the standard of the debate as he's discussing.
Mr. Chairman, no, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman.
No, wait a second.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, a point of order, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mr. Chairman, what's the point of order? Mr. Chairman, I have been one of the few members in this House who has actually brought a private member's motion to this House. I have a private member's motion standing in my name as it relates to mandatory parenting seminars for persons who are on the PATH program, having regard to, Mr. Chairman, having regard to the poverty of reproduction in this country and the fact that we cannot have parents who are on PATH programs, 3 children, 4 children, 5 children, 6 children, Mr. Chairman, and there are no mandatory parenting seminars. Mr. Chairman, there have been several debates in the House, Mr. Chairman, on which I have participated, Mr. Chairman. So again, Mr. Chairman, we're getting personal. Members are making points, and what are we doing again? We're getting personal, and we're launching personal attacks, Mr. Chairman. And I ask you, Mr. Chairman, to ask members to mind their tongue, Mr. Chairman, and just let's have the discussion in a proper manner. There's nothing wrong with what Member Dalrymple brought before the House, Mr. Chairman, and as a House of members, we can treat the matter with respect, Mr. Chairman, and we can have the deliberations. Member Denise also indicated she has no objection with the matter going to the House.
Chairman. You have said enough, man. Jesus,
bless his name.
Yeah. Chairman, again, as I started out, if it is that the members do not see the value in the oversight committee or the work that we have been doing so far as a committee, if they have not seen the value not only to the process here in the House but to the Jamaican people, then they should state so. And I asked a question yesterday of some members who was a part of the Economic and Production Committee. What is the purpose of going down this road if it is that we have not been getting value from our proceedings over the last 2 election cycles? If they are seeing no value in it, then say so. Otherwise, then why haven't members of this committee who have been raising this issue with contention, why haven't they themselves raised the issue in the House and referred to the prescribed committee of Parliament to get the matter? And why come here each time to try and shut down the deliberations of the committees?
All right.
If they can answer that one, Chairman, I would love them to answer.
I think Member Holness, you had wanted to say something, and then Members? I have Member Holness on the floor. Member Holness, can I take Member Jackson?
She's getting briefing.
Member Holness, can I?
Chairman?
Yes.
This morning, on one of my many occasions of being at PAAC early, I came in ready to have robust discussions and debate. When you started out with the issue of going on the retreat, I was very happy because I have found that time and time again, we actually come here and waste both our time, the civil servants' time, and the people of Jamaica's time. It is now 11:30, Chairman. It's an hour and a half after we should have started our discussions for today. Yes, I believe so, member. No, it is not. Chairman.
Members, please. Members, please. Members, please. Member Holness, proceed.
Don't shout, man. Let me learn something from you, know. Graceful.
Yes, Member Holness, please proceed.
Chairman.
Learn from you, man. Don't shout.
As Chairman, I believe, having listened to all the members, that we should place the matter before the Regulations Committee and do so.
Regulations in the House. Go ahead.
Yeah. And do so and move quickly into doing our own retreat, Chairman. I am at a place where I believe our internal discussion, as we're having this morning for the last hour and a half, should take place internally. And we should sit down together, go through and determine how we are going to proceed going forward. So, Chairman, at this stage, I think we should put it to a vote. And you should do the necessaries and refer on our behalf whether or not we continue.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman.
All right, no.
With your permission, that's a quick intervention.
Let me finish before your intervention. Chairman, when member Dalrymple Philibert spoke earlier today, I recall her saying I wasn't at the last meeting. Another issue that continues to come up is exactly how do we decide what it is that we are going to deliberate, and it continuously happens. A part of what came in that note she spoke about, which she figured had gone public, is how we decide what we will meet and deliberate on. I remember having gotten that memo that the chairman is suggesting, so I knew what we were to come and deliberate based on your suggestion. There are members who take issue with it because they believe that we should go, as is the requirement, by referral from the House. It's not the whole House. Member Phillips, you were not here, so you weren't listening.
Members, please, allow Member Holness.
It is 16 members of the House, Member Phillips, who would refer matters to the committee, number one. And two, the majority of members can equally. Member? Chairman, I do not believe there is any value in us continuing past having given everybody the opportunity to make a comment, and we should vote and allow the civil servants, if the decision is that they go today, to go, having spent an hour and a half sitting down outside.
Yes, the last intervention.
That's a brief intervention, Chair. I'm gathering that there are basically two issues here of dispute. One is the question of referral of matters to the committee.
And on that note, I will cite an example to make the point that 77A refers to regarding referrals. The sessional committees of Parliament sit to deal with matters throughout the session, routinely matters that it has before it. There are times when there are matters that the nature of it that comes up in the House that needs to be further explored, that cannot be done in the full House, that needs a committee to dig in greater detail. And it determines which. In a case in point, Mr. Chairman, when I raised the matter of the banking fee, the House felt that it needed greater exploration. And a resolution by that 16-member vote referred the matter to a select committee. Remember, let me make my point. You can make yours. The House, Mr. Speaker, took the decision that the matter of the banking fees that requires special further investigation that the full House could not do in a debate, refer the matter to one of the select committee. In that case, I had asked in the resolution for it to be referred to the Economy and Production Committee. That now becomes another agenda item for that committee. That is the provision under 77A regarding referral of matters from the full House, which is separate and apart from the routine activities of the sessional committees. Now, in the case of the PAAC, there are matters in statute which supersedes provision here. The law specifies that those matters must be sent to the PAAC, such as the matters of appropriation and administration in the current financial year. That is provision in the law. We don't need any further clarification unless we want to change that. That is already in the law. I cannot cite the exact piece of legislation now, but we can research it and bring it to your attention. That refers the current budget to this committee. It is on that basis that these agencies are here. It's not because of no member raised anything outside of the budget. It is on that basis why they are here, and it would be irresponsible for this committee to take a vote not to deal with what is rightfully before it by virtue of legislation. The second point, Mr. Chairman, the second point. Not even the cabinet can legally advise itself. If there is a matter of legal interpretation, none of us, no matter how competent we are as lawyers here, can give legal advice. We can give legal opinion, right? But that has no value in terms of the decision that the committee. There is a body named the Attorney General's Chamber that provides legal advice. That is what guides all entities of the public sector, the civil service and the public sector in general. So no proffering of legal opinion here as any standing in terms of the interpretation here. So if Mr. Chairman, if we believe that the matter needs legal clarification, first of all, our first port of call for clarification and procedure is the clerk of the House. Where the clerk of the House can give binding, if they can give guidance. If the members believe that there's still clarification, this is where I agree with my colleague from Northeast St. Catherine, that we refer the matter and we seek legal clarification until such time that we get that legal clarification and directives. We are left to proceed on the provisions of the standing order under the guidance of the clerk. That's one of the reasons why, Mr. Chairman, and I'm closing, that's one of the reasons why, Mr. Chairman, the person that occupies the chair of clerk of the House is required to be a trained lawyer to provide that legal expertise to the committee. It is not by chance. I remember in previous years, one very experienced deputy clerk could not become the clerk because he was not a qualified lawyer. There was wisdom in those provisions. We must not, out of convenience, throw all of that through the window and just do what is convenient to us at the moment.
Chairman, Member Jackson, Member Jackson is contradicting himself, because this is part of the problem. This is part of the problem, Chairman. The clerk has actually spoken, and we are actually here debating and advocating for what the clerk has said. And we are in agreement on that point with Member Jackson, that if it is that we need to refer to the AG, go ahead. We are in agreement, because until we refer, and we have been asking, so until we refer and get a ruling, we already have a ruling from the clerk.
So, all right, members. No, members, please, I think we have had a fulsome discussion. Members, everybody has spoken. Members, I think we have had a fulsome discussion. Let me start by saying what I intend to do, but I would also like to add my comments as a member of the committee. I start by just saying that I think we're all in agreement that, number one, it is a matter that needs to have a fulsome discussion at the retreat. I think the retreat is timely. All right, we had started this discussion and gotten a bit sidetracked, but we had put on the table the 30th as a date for the retreat, and I would like us, if possible, to ratify it, and this would have to be one of the items. Pardon? No, it's 30th or 31st, sorry. Wednesday the 31st. And we are going to need, now, members, and just to say that whether we refer to the Standing Orders Committee or we look, because what we are looking at, I think that we can, if members will allow, I will speak to the clerk and ask the appropriate avenue, and I think that is some advice that we get at the time. But members, I've listened very carefully, and I just want to say my side, and I think we have to look at this. We must always look at these things from both sides of the coin. One day you sit on this side, the other day you sit on that. What we all want is a better country. That's what we all proclaim. And at the end of the day, all of us, in many of the speeches we give, we speak about good governance, and we speak about openness and transparency. And I think one of the things that we must be careful about is not just saying the words, but ensuring that our actions and the policies we put in place reflect that. Because one day you're on this side, the other day you're on that. The oversight committees of the House have been in place for many years. In the years that they have been in place, the most effective one was always the PAAC. It's a historic. The other sessional select committees really became more effective because of two things that happened. One took place in the early 90s, and I'm proud to say my father was part of it at the time as House leader. They understood that openness of these committees, the discussions and debate of these committees to the public and to the media were important because it gave greater scrutiny. The second thing was that the committees would be chaired by members of the opposition. And there's a real reason for this. When they were chaired by government members on both sides, these committees never met, because you cannot ask government to provide oversight for itself. It just will not work. So the fact of the matter is that there are two things that are essential. Transparency, number one, and that they must be chaired by the opposition. Now, and I just put this here, there are various things that govern us. One has to do with the laws, the standing orders. The other has to do with convention. We are here having a debate robustly about interpretations. However, and I don't say this to be contentious, but I think as a committee we must recognize both sides. Very clearly in the standing order, it says that no Minister of State or Permanent Secretary would sit on the committee. However, we have gone to the House, notwithstanding, and indicated that although it is convention, we should allow for that to happen. But I'm making the point, it is clearly, members please, it is clearly stated in the standing order that this is not something that should be entertained. And as Member Campbell said, it didn't say, it said shall. Therefore, in your own words, Member Campbell, it's not something that was open for interpretation. Now, how have we always dealt with the matters in this committee? We set an agenda, and there was a discussion, and Member Holness and Member Campbell were very instrumental in that discussion, where we set an agenda, and the agenda has been circulated. All members know what is coming from week to week. What we have here at the Ministry of Economic Growth is something that has been set 7 months ago or 6 months ago at the start of the year. They are part of the regular. However, I just want to make 2 points why this is important. Number one, because you do have an agenda. Number one is that from time to time, matters arise in the public sphere, which we as members, on behalf of our constituents, should be looking into. For example, just this morning I looked at something, last week, sorry, about Minister Chuck bringing, I don't know, 54,000 outstanding traffic tickets, and the fact that there are 3 or 4 agencies and that they're not collecting and that the warrants are not going out. I don't know all the legal details. We have a lot of lawyers here. However, as a committee, in my mind, these are things that should be looked at by the committee. So when they arise, we as a committee, notwithstanding that we have an agenda, must look at issues that are germane to efficiency, to good running of government. It's part of the oversight. Secondly, no, please, let me finish. The second thing is that there are some issues, and I make the point, a comment was made about qualifications. At the sitting we had with the last sitting with the Ministry of Energy, where USF was here, I made the point that someone was hired, and at the time they were hired, there was information that other persons had sought to get the job who may have had other qualifications. Now, it is in the best interest of the country, the government, everybody, for openness and transparency. So questions like that, where we ask, is it so, could we see who the persons were that had sought to get the job and who were overlooked, did not shortlist? These go to matters of efficiency, because it is the managing of the interests of the people of Jamaica. And therefore, those are questions, and I put that question to them simply because we must have those answers, because I go back to the issue of good governance. Openness and transparency must not just be words. So I just say this to you. Over the last few months, I've walked around Jamaica. Persons have said to me that they feel that the PAAC is doing its work, simply because we have found matters of breaches of procurement guidelines. We have found corruption. We have found nepotism. We have found real issues. That is the function of this committee. And I would just say to my members, while considering, one day you're on this side, one day you're on that. Let us ensure that we do what's right for Jamaica. And remember, anything that limits this power of this committee allows for bad governance. If you are asking this committee that everything it does refer back to the House majority, you are taking away all the systems you have put. So members, members, as I said, you know, one of the things we find is that there always are different interpretations. So members, as I said at the start, members please, as I said at the start, I'm going to speak to the clerk about the referral, about getting legal advice in all its ramifications. And I would urge members if we can have our retreat on the 31st, and this could be the first item. Now members, a number of members have spoken about the persons who are waiting outside, but I thought it was important to have this debate. It is in this public sphere. Everyone wanted to have their say, and I'm going to now invite the members of the ministries here for us to have whatever we can, because I think this is the third time, and I would like us to just conclude and move on.
Sure.
Chairman, we're going to put it to a vote, Chairman, because that is exactly what we are deliberating, how proceedings are handled. And Chairman, sometimes when you reach your conclusion, it is not the conclusion of the membership of the committee. So when Member Jackson says something and Member Phillips repeats it, even though it's incorrect, you summarize and you say the same. My clear understanding it is not the chairman who determines, based on his whim or her whim and fancy, what it is that is to be discussed or deliberated at PAAC.
And it never
and when
has
you
been.
made your comment, Chairman, I'm sorry I tried to interject, but I would love for you to answer. Who sets the agenda? Is it the committee or is it the chairman?
Chair,
And Chairman, when you're finished, and Chairman, when you're finished answering that question, I would ask that we put to a vote whether or not we continue in the way that we have been doing, which we have all argued is incorrect. And though we have not yet received the guidance of the AG, which we in the majority fits, have argued is incorrect, and though we have not yet received the advice of the AG, until then we have the advice of the clerk. Until then, we have the advice of the clerk. So, Chairman, please answer the question, and then I would ask that we put it to a vote.
Member Holness, this is not the first that you have asked this question, and I repeat, and I said it clearly. An agenda was sent out. I sent you the agenda specifically at the start of the year. The committee, including you specifically, I sent it specifically to you. Member Holness, no. Member Holness, we are following the same agenda. What note?
The note we got, Chairman, didn't say that. The note actually said that the chairman is suggesting. You are suggesting, and I'll go back if I can find it. The note that was sent to us. You are suggesting that we take X, Y, and Z this week.
Yeah.
The chairman.
Please, no. I would like, Member Holness, the agenda speaks to we are on the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. There are a number of agencies, which include the Land Agency, UDC, etc. They have come before. We are completing the discussion on them. This is part of the agenda that was approved by you and this committee. And quite frankly, I sent it to you. And Member Holness, I go further. Yes, Member Holness, there's a full email trail, and it is in the minutes, the agenda for the year. No, Member. No, I will seek to. No, I will seek to send you from earlier minutes. No, because we have had this discussion before, and I've been at pains to clear it up. We have an agenda, and I'm making the point that I still firmly believe that as matters arising, we bring those issues to the committee, and we have always, as we have always done. And I'm saying to you, what we're doing here is simply completing what was started. If you remember, if you remember, we had a meeting, we had the earlier meeting where we spoke to the UDC. They actually have been here. We're concluding the deliberations with them.
No, Chairman, you haven't answered my question. When matters arise, who sets the agenda? Because
No.
if it
Chairman,
is, Chairman, that you're saying when matters arise of public importance, it means it could not have been on the agenda.
No.
So who determines? And that's the question I'm
hold
asking,
on,
Chairman. So you
yes,
can answer me very clearly, either the
Yes.
Chairman or the majority of the committee.
No, member Holness. No, please. Let me answer the questions and I'll give everyone a chance. Member Holness, every single person who has been invited to this committee, everyone where there's a new matter arising, it has come to the committee and permission has been sought from the committee on each and every occasion. But Member Holness, I would ask you if that is a feeling, please let me know, because this is not something that is open for interpretation. At all stages we have brought it. Member Phillips or Member Daly, I think you're both. You yield? Or you?
I just want to find out. First of all,
Yes.
My concern is, my concern is whether or not what really caused this kind of debate in terms of interpretation of laws, what take place in the PAC, who raised this matter, because I have been here and I've never heard it before. Is it coming out of something? I want to know, because I am sitting here, I do not know where it came from, who raised this matter that it becomes such a big concern that we are debating it for so long. And the second thing that I want to find out is, who used to set the agendas before? What mechanism we used to use to set the agenda?
And Member Holness, what I will seek to do again is to send you all the documentary, because I think maybe it's a lack of continuity. Every person who has been invited here has done so on the advice of the committee. So I'm just saying, and as I said, when I bring something, it is in that man.
Chairman, you had one meeting where you made a suggestion. It was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, as to what you wanted to do the following meeting. And I remember saying, Chairman, let us discuss it afterwards. We were not in agreement. The majority was not in agreement. And you went ahead and decided that this is the decision. I remember when the meeting was finished, myself, Member Terry Long, and a couple other persons came to the front to discuss. By then it was settled and we went along. And I'm just saying, Chairman, that I would love for us to be in a place where, as a membership, it is not about only what the chairman wants to discuss, or browbeaten by loudest mouth person on the committee, Mr. Jackson.
No, please.
I knew he was gonna assault before he heard it.
You're assaulting the chairman.
No, not assaulting the chairman.
No, man, you're blaming
Remember,
the loudest
Jackson, I
mouth.
think you were pointing when you were talking. Look.
Just to be clear, Chairman, in terms of the issues that we would love to discuss. So one of the burning topics for me was Manchester Parish Council. And up to now, I have never seen anything discussed on that most topical issue of what was perceived as major theft and corruption in the Manchester Parish Council. Up to today, not a word.
Member,
so
anything,
that's why.
no, member, anything that a member wants to put on the table, by all means. And that, I think, by saying what you're saying, you're really justifying the way in which the committee operates. So let us, but members, please, I think, look, you know, as I said, we say one, we agree. Yeah, Member Terrelong, please, and Member Campbell, just 1 second. I think, again, we are saying one thing and doing another. We are halfway through a deliberation which we can complete today. We have the agencies and the technocrats outside. Member after member after member has spoken about it, and we are simply putting it off.
Chairman, you're trying to paint a flaw, which is really very beautiful already.
How?
And there's no need to do that. Let me just suggest, Chairman, that as I indicated earlier, that if we just take a look back at what happened to Indicom. Indicom, as state entity, was proceeding along a particular path on the mistaken belief that it had the power to persecute and prosecute police officers, until the Court of Appeal of this country slapped them on the arm and said, you are wrong. And that's all I'm saying in this context is there's no need for an interpretation here. It is very, very clear. And because I recall Queen's Counsel down in Maypen telling me, when I just come back from the UK, oh, what does he know about law? Until I pointed out to him that under Section 25 of the Firearms Act, anytime you use a legal firearm to do an illegal act, you were then in possession of an illegal firearm, right? At which point, he had to pay my client for the injury which he had done. And I've had several examples. And for my friends to come here and to talk about wanting to thwart democracy, what is a greater level of thwarting, if I may so describe it? An attempt to use a procedure and to talk about what convention? There is absolute no convention can trump this standing order. None.
No,
and I say so without reservation.
Well, you know, that's a very interesting statement.
It can't. There's no convention. Whatever has to take place, there has to be a specific piece of legislation. Alternatively, you come to the House and you move the resolution and you get the confirmation of the House to do it. Or alternatively, you amend this.
You know,
so I don't know
Campbell,
if you are using the wrong procedure. You are breaking the law that you have set yourself.
Let me ask Campbell. Mr. Campbell, you know, one of the things I found is that every time I've seen a court case, there's a lawyer bringing the court case, but there's one that disagrees. There are two sides of the interpretation, and I'm simply making a point to you that your interpretation is one and there are other. Mr. Campbell
insists there is no interpretation. It's very clear.
There's no
interpretation. It's an application of the existing rules. And I demand,
and again,
Chairman, tell him to leave then, Chairman.
Chairman, allow me, please. I have sat and I've been patient. And the kind of, it is clear that all my colleagues are being disingenuous.
Which colleagues, Mr. Campbell?
Point on me, man.
No, Mr. Campbell, Mr. Campbell. Because someone disagrees with you does not make them disingenuous. And I'll be very clear. Mr. Campbell, I will be clear with you.
Chairman, have you heard some of the statements being made? Who has brought this? What does it matter who has brought it? The fact is, it's before the committee. It is before you. And you are expected, Chairman, in these circumstances, not to go into the fray.
Chairman.
You are expected to make a ruling and rule according to the rules which should guide us.
Chairman.
What are the rules which guide this committee in making its deliberations?
Chairman.
And in these circumstances, Chairman, I'll ask you your permission to move a motion for us to adjourn these proceedings pending
the determination by the House Committee as to what is the appropriate application of the rules in these circumstances.
Chairman, let me just,
yes, sir.
let me, because if we're to go back, Chairman,
it doesn't work like that.
Chairman,
you should know better. Member Phillips?
If we are to go back to, because the member is referring to one section of the standing orders, 73A. 73A lists out the responsibility of the PAAC. He's referring to one section. We still have the responsibility to examine budgetary expenditure of government.
Chairman.
No, man, you are allowed to speak.
Chairman,
you are allowed to speak.
On a point of order.
And I'm not yielding, Chairman.
On a point of order. And you can firstly rule
I'm not
on
yielding, Chairman.
I'm
not yielding.
No, please.
I'm not yielding. You can't show point of order. I say I'm not yielding.
Members, I'm asking you, members, one of the things I've done is allowed every member to have their say. Please, or accordingly, Member Phillips, please complete. Member Campbell, you will have all, if you would like to rebut. Member Phillips, I have not moved the motion.
73A,
I have to move the motion, and you know that. So please, Member Phillips.
So, Chairman, so the member keeps referring back to 77.1. But 73A still gives us some responsibility as a committee. And there's no reason why, until we get a ruling from the clerk or the legal just be quiet and listen. And we are saying that we need more clarity. Because, Chairman, if you are to read that note from the clerk, who said that the speaker, who said that the speaker,
members,
Mr. Chairman,
Member Phillips,
Mr. Chairman, we have seen it.
No,
Mr. Chairman, and you had basically agreed on early that it will be sent to whichever legal department within the government itself for a ruling on it, or send it to the Regulations Committee. But, Chairman, I'm going to say it again. Starting from the beginning of the financial year, when the leader of government business and his deputy started out by trying to stranglehold the committees by not allowing them to meet. And I am saying again, Chairman, especially for Member Campbell, who has been raising this over and over again, has had the responsibility as a member of this committee and a member of the House to refer this matter to the Regulations Committee of Parliament. It is he and the leader of government business and the members of the government on this committee who has been trying to stranglehold the committees from doing its work. And this is just another exhibition of their behavior of trying to stifle the parliament of this country and the committee. So, Chairman, I am saying to you, Chairman, that even though there is a difference of opinion of 77.1, 73A still gives the committee some responsibility, and we should continue with the work that we have begun. This is about the third time that the UDC is coming here. And I bet you that you close this committee down for the rest of this political year.
Members,
bet you.
Members,
you do not wish the people any good at all.
Member Terrell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I think we are descending into a very parochial arena, Mr. Chairman. And I, you know, and I mentioned it earlier. The level of disrespect, the tone of the discussions, Mr. Chairman, people are getting so personal, everybody's so angry. And Mr. Chairman, we have to consider the public. We have to consider the fact, Mr. Chairman, that of late there's been great interest, and I will say it, of late there has been great interest in parliamentary committees. Everybody's watching, Mr. Chairman. And we have to remind ourselves that as parliamentarians, we set the bar. We raise the bar, Mr. Chairman. And so if we could just take a minute to compose ourselves, Mr. Chairman, and also to remind ourselves that whatever we do or say in here, it resonates outside, Mr. Chairman. There are little girls and little boys who are perhaps still on the Easter holiday who are watching or listening, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I recall on one occasion when we were inside this very house, and members behaved in a particular manner. I remember there were school children there, Mr. Chairman, and they left the house simply because of how we as members collectively conducted ourselves. Mr. Chairman, I recall having on several occasions to apologize to civil servants, Mr. Chairman, based on insinuations that are made and the personal attacks and how collective we behave ourselves, Mr. Chairman. And so I've sat and I've listened, and Mr. Chairman, one of the things I've always been asked in the committee and Mr. Chairman, and I'll say another example. And it cannot be, Mr. Chairman, that members on this committee get so personal. And the word disingenuous was used, and it is disingenuous, Mr. Chairman, when members say to the civil servants, oh, I have a memo and I have a note, and it says this and says that. And when they're challenged, can we see the note? Can we see the memo? Where's it from? Let's look at the veracity of the memo. And then suppose that memos then therefore retreat into bags and on the tables, Mr. Chairman. So those are some of the things that the member is speaking about when he says disingenuous. And Mr. Chairman, you're aware of a particular example that happened recently. So, Mr. Chairman, another thing I want to correct, because again, I'm very mindful that when certain reports get out, Mr. Chairman, you get one headline, and the headline does not necessarily speak to what happened or what was said. Mr. Chairman, I heard you refer to matters being referred to the majority of the House or to the House majority. Again, Mr. Chairman, that is not correct. That is not what Member Campbell mentioned, Mr. Chairman. And a proper reading of 77A, referral of matters to select committee.
Could you suggest to me what? 1 second. Could you suggest what is being requested?
No, Mr. Chairman. No, the point is a correction. I'm saying that at no point.
But I want a correction plus a clarification.
Yes, that's fine. Right. What he referred to at 77A, a matter may be referred to a select committee if, on the question being put, at least 16 members of the House so decide. So, Mr. Chairman, it is not that when Member Darrell raised the issue and when Member Campbell spoke on the issue, that they're saying that when matters are referred from the House to a select committee, Mr. Chairman, that it requires a majority. It is a mere 16. Whether it's 16 collectively, 16 on this side, 16 on that side, it doesn't matter. So it's a 16, both 16. So, Mr. Chairman, both sides of the House are comprised far more than 16. So, Mr. Chairman, there is no attempt. And I keep hearing this with the Muslim and everything, Mr. Chairman. It is not correct. I've also taken note, Mr. Chairman, that there are 6 first-time MPs sitting here. And, Mr. Chairman, I make the point again. Unless and until we start to refresh our parliament systematically, Mr. Chairman, with new minds to get new ideas of doing things, Mr. Chairman, then some of these discussions will never happen. Because the truth is, minus all the hysteria and the drama and all the fancy words that would seek to inflame and to get some sort of sensational headline, the truth is, this has the potential of being a robust discussion that elevates how we practice in the parliament in this land, and for us to move away from practicing matters and debating matters in a very ad hoc manner. This really is an intelligent discussion, Mr. Chairman, as it relates to the interpretation of the standing orders. And one of the things Member Campbell has indicated is that perhaps it's time for us to amend the standing orders so that we can properly practice in the manner that we wish to practice, Mr. Chairman. That is a very proper discussion for us to be had. So, Mr. Chairman, I just think let's just get away from the parochial and focus on what is lawful and what is legal, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Members? Member Darren, because.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think you have been very even-handed and done very well as Chairman in handling this matter this morning. I want respectfully, again, as I started this morning, to say it is now after 12. We have had the civil servants outside all morning. I don't know that we have anything to achieve with this level of discussion. And I really think at this point, I would like to ask that we move for an adjournment and let us put our house in order so that when we do have the civil servants being brought back here before us, it will mean. When I say so, put things together, because to be honest, member, this morning's discussion, one thing that I do agree with Member Terry Long, what he said, what is before us is a motion that can help elevate and can in fact cause us to function at a more settled and a better level in the Parliament. And I agree with that. You have allowed all of us to speak. The morning has been well spent. I think at the end of the day, we have a memo from the clerk who we all respect. And since the morning has been so far spent, I don't think that there is any more for us to do except to move for an adjournment. Because really and truly, by the time you invite people in and you start and you push them out, what are you saying to them? They are to come back again, when in fact we have a retreat on the table for the 31st. This matter has to be discussed and we have to decide. And I think, I don't know if I'm correct, because I do not sit on the internal and external committee there, but when this matter arose on the last time, the way the matter was resolved by the chairman was to take a vote. And maybe you could follow suit if that is how you feel that, democracy will take. We take a vote and move forward for the adjournment.
Member, really? You want to say something? Use the mic.
I yield, Chairman.
Members, I will tell you, my position is this. As a committee, we have a job to perform. What has been brought here has been a question of how we operate with regard to matters referred. What we have before us today is a matter that has been on the agenda from the start of this session. And we have asked the civil service servants to come despite the debate, and I allowed everyone all the latitude. I think it's even more of a disservice. I think the proper service would be to just finish off so that they do not have to come back. I don't think there are contentious issues here. I think it is just something for us to complete. This falls squarely in remit 1A of what we do in the standing orders, and it follows the agenda. Therefore, for us to put it off to do other matters, in my estimation, is a matter of disrespect to them and their time. On
the advice of the clerk, we need to vote on it. Chairman, I hate to say this.
Yes, and I'm saying
we are more disrespectful to bring in the civil servants after for half an hour, because we finished the committee meeting at 1. What do you expect to achieve?
And because I believe, member, that we should be able to finish so that they do not have to come back. It is the only time that this committee has deliberated for long lengths is when we have found issues. And so, members, just before I invite them in, Member Dalrymple, please. Member Dalrymple, please, before, I just want one last thing. Member, I understand the CDF have a retreat on the 31st. I think this is given that this is of great moment, everyone is clamoring for it. Can we do it for next week, Wednesday? Sure. And we'll ask the clerk, let me please ask whether or not we have time to do so. If not, we may have to do it on another. But members, as I said, I had to make a ruling. Member Dalrymple, I know you say often my rulings, they go one way, they go the other. And I'm going to ask members if we may, if we invite them, and please, we are going to allow.
But Chairman, can you just rule without a vote? We are all here as members of a committee.
I am following an agenda that has been set already. So are you going to say that on every issue, Member Dalrymple, on every issue, what will happen is you are now getting to the point where you're going to be using the numbers to stifle the conversation of the Parliament? Member Dalrymple, let us be very clear.
But Chairman, it is not unusual.
Sure,
you had a committee, hold on, numbers
what
rule.
Is not
the committee
unusual?
that had a vote the other day, the numbers ruled and we had to abide by the decision of the majority. It is, you all talk about democracy. Democracy is about rule by the majority.
And Member Dalrymple, please, as I said to you, we are here dealing with a matter
the
of...
internal and external committee was chaired by my good friend, Mr. Jackson. I would love to hear his point on it, because he was the chairman. He took a vote.
And let me, for the record, let me tell you what that vote was for. At that meeting, Mr. Chairman, we were to decide on what new things to come. It never had to do with any existing. Because at that meeting,
in the middle of a debate, having invited persons
to
just decide
on
not
what new matters or entities to come. It was never what was before the committee. So I'm happy to correct my good friend.
And Member Dalrymple, there's nothing. Please let us. Member Dalrymple, please let's not make contention where they need not have any.
You know I've been respectful. This is not a contention. I just believe that if we are deciding something and we are here, the majority, you take a vote.
But what happens is that, and I'm saying to you, what would happen is we would have no debates. Each meeting you could just come and say it's over. So members, with that, I'm going to ask the orderly to invite them. And what I would say to members, let us please try and finish today so that they do not have to come back.
Mr. Chairman, just a little observation, housekeeping matter. Just an observation I wish to make. Mr. Chairman, the conduct of the committees historically has been conducted in a very collegiate way. And I observe in recent times, over time, members tend to occupy a certain seat, right? Certain members occupy another seat out of, practice.
A sense of...
Yes. And the collegiate nature of the committee, we realize in recent time has been railroaded. And I'm hearing that elections are called and seating. And I will just appeal, Mr. Chairman, that we return to that collegiate manner of conduct where we respect. There are certain members who sit certain place every week. And if I come, I'll never sit in that seat because my colleague has established that this is where they prefer to sit. So I'm just making an appeal that we just try to desist from the tribalism and we resort to the collegiate nature of the committees. That has worked well over the years.
Up to you.
Just an observation, Mr. Chairman.
All right. And members, what I'm going to ask. Members, I think if we can today, let us see if we can just conclude, if possible. I'm going to ask the permanent secretary, saying she's not feeling 100%, and she has asked us if we can start off with PS with UDC. You had indicated. What I'm going to ask members is if UDC can just give its broad report, introduce its members, and then to the extent that there are questions or not, we release them as they go along, because I want to give PS a commitment that we can come out of here as quickly as possible. I think she has been here a number of weeks. I think we need to try our best to release her once and for all, members, if possible. So with that, PS, if there's anything you'd like to say, and then turn it over to UDC.
Whose is this? That's mine. Not done anything to the mic.
None of the mics in the back are working either. You want to try it again?
Mic check. Okay, seems to be one. Okay, let me go again. Good afternoon, Chairman and committee members, colleagues. This afternoon we are here from the Urban Development Corporation, the National Land Agency, and NEPA. With me here in the front are, to my immediate right, Ms. Heather Pinnock, and she's the acting general manager. To my left is Mr. Donald Hamilton, Deputy General Manager, Finance, Treasury and Investment. And beside Ms. Pinnock is Ms. Yvette Siblers. She's General Counsel, but we're also accompanied by Mr. Sherlock Jenister, Deputy General Manager, Corporate Services, Major Peter Risden, Director, Projects, Planning, Development, and Project Management, as well as Mr. Richard Pickard, Acting Deputy General Manager, Planning, Development, and Project Management. This afternoon, we are here to provide an update to the committee of some of the works, the projects that UDC has been undertaking, and we avail ourselves to any questions or any need for any clarification.
All right, would the General Manager like to say anything? Or you're... No, you'd have to use that mic if you so. We're having some challenges we're going to.
No, as I know we're late, we can get into it.
Pardon?
We can
okay.
Begin.
All right, members, are there any questions? I think just from our perspective though, Jim, just an idea of UDC, just the big projects you have, and basically how you're proceeding, and whether or not you're on the timeline that had been outlined.
Okay, as you know, UDC does projects in its main designated areas, and I will start with Ocho Rios. In Ocho Rios, we have a number of projects under construction, well, a number of projects, including the Turtle River Walk Promenade, which was recently completed. It was completed in June of this year. And we currently have the Main Street improvement works. Those are under construction now. We also have some projects that are in planning for Ocho Rios, including Ocho Rios Bay Beach, which is a project that has gone to the PIMSEC. That's the upgrade of Ocho Rios Bay Beach.
That's the one in front of like Turtle Towers down
Correct.
to Moon, that
Yes.
beach. It's gone to who?
PIMSEC. The concept
Who
was
is
submitted
who
to
is
PIMSEC.
PIMSEC? You said PIMSEC?
Yeah, PIMC, sorry, the
Project Implementation Management Committee.
Right.
Or Project Implementation
Public
Management.
investment, public investment management committee.
Okay.
Management Secretariat, and then it would go to PIMC, which is a committee that makes final approval for projects.
And that is it's like a committee, what, of ministers of...
Yes, and it is chaired by the Minister of Finance.
Right,
the one that
right.
gives the final approval.
Because it deals with, in other words, sort of multi-agency
yes.
funding projects.
Right. So when it goes to PIMSEC, they do their evaluation, assessment, feasibility, and make recommendation thereafter to PIMC. And PIMC will make the final decision.
PIMC is... yes. PIMC is what the difference? Just to
the Secretariat is headed by Mr. Livermore, which is PIMSEC. So the initial concept document is sent there. They review it, and then they will say to us, we have reviewed, please go ahead to develop the project fully. So when we do the full project proposal development, we submit it back to PIMSEC. They review it, and when they believe that it is at a stage that for it to be recommended to PIMC, they will recommend it to PIMC, and it goes to PIMC, and that's where a final decision is made prior to the project going to cabinet.
So like the Main Street would have gone to PIMSEC and PIMC and gotten approval before. Got you. Yes.
And that is before cabinet. It goes through
That's
those
the beach.
processes. Whatever the development is, it has to get PIMC's approval before it goes to cabinet.
Before it goes. So it's almost like infrastructure committee.
Yes.
It used to be.
Yes.
All right. So just Main Street, has that started?
Yes.
Or is that in PIMSEC?
Main Street is in construction. That's phase 1 of Main Street is in construction.
All right. Members, I don't know if I'm the only one here. I'm not quite certain what Main Street, Ocho Rios.
Oh, you want to know the scope of the works?
Yeah, because I remember back in 2014, with UDC, we had 3 phases to this upgrade. The Turtle River, the Promenade, and the Main Street. But the Main Street was by far the biggest because there was a whole discussion whether we should cobblestone some of it, and you needed to broaden both sidewalks. There was legislative as well as infrastructural work. Turtle River is complete.
That is the road from the Main
pier.
Street to the pier is completed.
Good.
The works at the pier are completed.
Exactly.
The promenade along the back of the beach is completed.
That's completed now?
Yes, it is.
Oh, excellent.
It completed in June. Yes, June of this year.
Excellent.
And now the first phase of Main Street, which is from the end of that Turtle River Road to the Ocho Rios Commercial Center.
Hold on, going again, from where?
To the first set of parking lots along Main Street.
So it's Main Street. So it goes from the clock.
It
goes from the clock?
No, from the other side. I'm going from the western side.
So you go from Island Village South.
Correct.
And go all the way in.
To the first set of parking lots. The parking lot where the UDC's office is.
Okay, so it's like half of the road before the Kentucky.
That's phase 1. And there's a proposal, there's planning done for phase 2.
What are you doing on Main Street?
The scope of works at Main Street, perhaps I can ask Mr. Pickard to detail. Do you remember the scope?
Yes. How are you, sir? Microphone, please.
Mic is working?
Try it.
Oh, we may have to use. Oh, you're working now.
The scope of works on Main Street.
Yeah, 1 second.
Oh, no.
Yes, please.
Check.
Yeah.
As you rightly said, Chair, the Main Street works involved infrastructure component. So unlike the other phases where it was mainly aesthetic, the Main Street component acted on NAA's stormwater plan for the drainage, where because of the 2008 event, steps were taken in that design so that the town wouldn't be flooded again. So Main Street is more than just aesthetic. It's actually redoing the drainage, how the drainage flows through the town. So, and that's why we have it phase 1 and phase 2. So what's happening now is that part of, you would know as the football field area, we had to reserve 3 acres of it, which it would become a calamity pond in case there's an event. Of course, there's also a storm surge at the same time. So that would collect all the water, and then it would be pumped out at a later time when the water's abated. So phase 1 of Main Street involves regrading the road so that it drains to the calamity pond, so that it can, instead of going directly out into the bay, because the other aspect of that is that the bay gets silted up after an event. So the calamity pond would actually catch all the silt that would go into the bay and disrupt it. And right now we're going to have to dredge the entire bay for it to work. So it's actually more substantial than just aesthetics for Main Street, and that's why we had to do it in 2 phases.
All right. When we had done the original design for this work,
right,
the cost was, we had estimated about $1 million US for Main Street. So I'm just I suspect from what I'm hearing for you that you have revised that budget.
Yes, and broken it up into discrete phases for funding and so on. So.
Pardon?
Yes, it's broken up into phases.
You mean Main Street?
Main Street, yes. So this phase.
Right. So, and secondly, they were supposed to, one of the problems was to ensure that the sidewalks,
yes,
that pedestrian was broadened, because part of the problem is persons who are walking around Ocharias are walking in the streets.
Right.
So we wanted, that's still part of the project?
That is still a part of it.
What phase?
This phase on Main Street, no, that is being done.
Right. You want to give us an idea of what the costings are for Main Street, or even phase 1, phase 2, give us an idea, because I suspect it's revised from what was in place before.
For the, okay, Jim will speak to that.
You guys going to have
to. The budget for phase 1 is $160 million.
What is the budget for the entire?
I think the balance, I don't have the budget. The budget for the phase 2 is more because it has some more drainage in it.
So it has been increased substantially. It has been, the scope of work has been increased substantially.
And as he said, it is the scope of works includes quite a bit of drainage consideration.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. I think from our perspective, one of the things that might be useful is to just send the committee just the sort of timeline so that we have an idea. I think we're all interested in this. I think a good.
You have the June 2018
Pardon?
report.
It was sent. The report was sent.
No, yeah, okay. No, I was talking about the timelines and all of that are in it.
Well, nothing would have.
The dates and the budgets are included in our report.
So you expect to finish this phase 1, which is mostly drainage, sidewalks, etc. by.
Phase 1 should be finished by early next year.
Okay. All right. Do you want to say something?
Chairman, but not on that particular matter.
Okay, well let them finish. So you said Main Street, the beach.
Yes, we're also doing the
Which is, that one is in PIMSEC.
Yeah, has gone through PIMSEC, yes.
Yes.
Yes, I'm going through what's in the report. To go to some others, we have stormwater drains coming back to our designated area in Caymanas. We have some stormwater drains in Caymanas.
Yeah.
We're looking at the expansion of the Hellshire sewage treatment plant. That's in St. Catherine as well. What else did I miss? We're also looking at the construction of a beach park, closed harbor beach park in Montego Bay.
That's the one down from in front of the old hospital site?
That's commonly referred to as Dump Up Beach.
All right.
And
you have how far have you reached with that?
It's with PIMSEC.
That one is with PIMSEC, and we are.
Oh, it's with PIMSEC as well.
We're in
they're
procurement.
doing their assessment.
You have some work going on down there with the groin.
The groin is also an extension of that project, which is a groin to protect the beaches, and the groins are going into procurement. So that the first phase of the groins work is going into procurement now. We also have the completion of the Red Rose and Jubilee markets here in Kingston, and we have the planning, of course, for the government overall project, and the completion of the construction of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade building on the downtown, at the waterfront.
Okay. That's
slated to be finished. Well, the Chinese company says they have a completion date of November, the end of November of this year.
Okay. All right. Okay. Are there any other major?
I think that's a summary of our major projects. Anything else
All right. Yes.
I should go first.
Just quickly on the Caymanas stormwater. I see where you have the completion for the 18th of November, somewhere about that time of this year, and
Caymanas primary infrastructure stormwater drainage system. It is scheduled for completion in January of 2019.
2019.
Yes.
But you have so far in May 49% of the work being completed. Can you give us an update of what you have so far now?
The stormwater drainage, what you're asking about? Just clarify. Okay. So we had the works had been deferred due to funding constraints, and all other aspects of the works were completed. The contract was just signed in August, and therefore the works are starting now. Contractor mobilized on site in September, October, and the works are expected to be completed in January. No, we signed the contract in August. The timing had to be scheduled according to our funding.
Sure. Sorry. No.
You look at the initiative.
I'm going to go in there. Okay. Mr. Chair, my colleague touched on one aspect of one of my concerns. I have a perennial problem in this committee with a multiplicity of entities in terms of the project planning. And at the end of each year, or substantially down each financial year, the projects are way behind what they have indicated they would have been at the beginning of the year. And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to repeat what I've said oftentimes. when the budget is presented, it does not only provide for, sets out financial expenditure over that period, it also conveys something to the public at large, what they should expect in that financial year. Now, as a member of parliament, all of us who are here, when we see provisions in the estimates of expenditure each year, we go to our constituency and advise them as to what should expect in that financial year. And it's premised on the assumption that the proper planning is done. One, the financial allocation has been secured for the projects to be completed in that particular period, or the level of completion to be reached in that financial year. Mr. Chairman, the bottom line is that we, all of us across political divide, is the one who come under pressure when these things are not done, when we go there at the beginning of the financial year and say this is provided for, that will be done. In these communities, there are people whose daily lives are affected by some of these infrastructural deficiencies. I can relate to one of them, like my colleague who referred to the Kemana's stormwater system. I have the ELSHA system. And some of your colleagues, madam, you're aware, we just had a meeting last week to deal with one particular area, not covered here today, because the residents' lives are affected on a daily basis. And with all due respect, when they run into problem and their lives are affected, it's not the agencies that they complain about and take out their frustration on. It is us, the members of parliament or the councillors. So I make a plea when the projects come, because when I look through the list of UDC projects, almost all of them are substantially behind. And it comes across from previous administration too, substantially below. And you know, I heard the answer you gave to my colleague, and I know the one you'll give to me for the one in my own constituency. And I take no comfort. I'm reluctant to go to my constituents and tell them that we project to have the sewage system over there being up to par. And in this particular case, Madam Acting General Manager, why I have a particular interest in this one too, is that there is an additional housing development that is currently on train, and it's going to tie into that system. And when the sewage system is not completed on time, you guys hand over the houses to the new occupants, frustrate them. I have that example over by Sandil Vista with the water system that was promised to be in place before completion, and everybody that lived there have to get tank to make their lives go on, because what was planned for was not executed on a timely basis. And who you think they come and complain to? Who you think they take out their anger on? And I understand why they are angry. It is me, the member of parliament. That is our living reality. So I see these reports on paper, but they translate into real life situations for all of us who sit here on both sides. So, Mr. Chairman, I am making a plea. And worse, they don't inform the residents to be affected about these delays and how they are affected their lives. That's the worst part of it. There's no big public announcement. So I'm making an appeal for the ELSHA one in particular, because it's very dear to me, but it affects all the other projects when you look through the report, how far behind they are.
Member Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To the Acting Director? Manager, sorry. Good morning. Good afternoon, as the case is. You mentioned the Close Harbour Bay development. I remember some 2 years ago, a presentation was made to us at the Convention Center in Montego Bay as it relates to the development that is supposed to be taking place in phases. I was told, or we were told, that the rebuilding of the groins and were the ones to be addressed in the first instance. And I did make mention of the North Gully that empties into the bay. At the time, I was told that they would have taken that into consideration. can you say definitively now if that was done? Because if you understand that there are two gullies that empties into the sea where Montego Bay is concerned, and the North Gully is right there in the close Harbour Bay vicinity, and everything that comes as far as Flower Hill Salt Spring is concerned comes down into the bay right there. And I do hope that that was taken into consideration and that something will be done to address the matter where, because I heard the good gentleman speak of siltation, and heavy siltation takes place in that area. We are presently losing the marine life in that area as we speak.
Okay. Yes, member. I can confirm that the first phase of the groin projects, the groin rehabilitation, would be addressing the section that goes to the North Gully. So the first phase would be the southernmost groin, which would be the groin that extends from the North Gully. So the primary, the first stage of refurbishment of the groins would be to address the North Gully side. That would be the first intervention.
Also, Mr. Chairman, is there anything that is going to be in the whole structuring, rehabilitation of the situation, where the capturing of the silt and debris that goes out into that specific area, the closed harbor? Because when you're on the hills and look down into the sea, it is not a pretty sight. So I'm just asking to you, Mr. Chair, is there any plans to trap the silt and the debris that goes out into the bay?
Okay. So apart from our planning, we are also collaborating with the Municipal Council, the St. James Municipal Council, on some other projects that they have looking at addressing issues all along the course of the North Gully, which would include looking at silt and garbage collection along the entire length of that gully.
All right. Member Terry Long.
Mr. Chairman, I believe Member Dalrymple had her hand up before mine.
I was just going back to the point, that we had been discussing, that we have to know what it is we are asking. We went back to the points about government and what we're investigating, and not to get into constituency things at this level. And it's a short period of time. When you do that, what answer do you expect us to get? Which is precisely the discussion we were having.
So we will deal with that. All right, members, if there are there any other questions? I have a.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I only indicated that.
Sorry. Oh, I thought she was speaking
Member
for you.
No, right, her hand was up before mine, and okay. Good. Is it after? Yes. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your patience and also for coming here today. I just want to know the projects that you have now. Are there any projects that have overruns, budgetary overruns, that we should be concerned with? And if so, what is the extent of the budgetary overruns? And also, what steps are being taken to ensure that the projects are completed within the timelines, and also to make sure that the overrun does not go beyond, let's say, a second set of what's the word I'm looking for? A second set of budgetary variations.
Okay. Well, let me first say that of the major projects that I reported, we have none with any major overruns. In fact, in our projects, we design in contingencies and preliminaries to look at those, to address those kinds of things that can come up, because there will always be unexpected items in construction. And so to date, the major projects that I've discussed, we haven't had any that have gone into any major overrun beyond that. Very specifically to how we are managing, what we're looking at is, as an institution, looking at our institutional model and our target, our operating model, about how we address our projects, and that we address projects not solely as technical undertakings, but also to look at the commercial side of our business and how we deliver the maximum benefits. So not only outcome, but that you get the benefits, and that the benefits include that we address environmental, economic, social concerns, so that our projects are really delivering as opposed to simply being undertaking construction.
Thank you.
All right, and Member Terlong, I think one of the difficulties and what we have to attempt to do, a lot of these projects are projects, especially the major ones, that were started years ago. So what has happened is that as they go along, it's taking a long time. I mean, as I said, some of those projects were started 2013, 2014, and I think cross administrations, one of the concerns that we all have here is the length of time. And we do recognize the planning that goes into it, the architecture, the consultations, etc. But your point is valid, because the longer a project takes, yes, almost certainly its costs are going to go up. Now, a lot of times they will say, yes, well, the scope has changed, there are different things in it. Absolutely need to be taken into account. But one of the things that I think as a committee we need to do is our mandate, part of it is to ensure that the budget remains true to itself. So at the start of the year, where they say to us that these are the projects and we hope to finish, for example, the construction of the ministry by the end of this year, or the beach by whenever, our thing is to, when we come back again, to ensure that they have completed, and if not, why, I think is an important part of it. All right, I have Member Phillips, I remember that. What? Well, I wasn't certain of the question. but you want to, go again. Just.
I admit that is a big question.
I know.
Because I was asking generally about the overall delays in virtually all the projects.
Which is
and
what,
I singled out one or two, one that I was more intimately related to. But why is it? Is it budgetary allocation? Is it that they don't have personnel capacity? Why is it that these projects are
take so long?
So long and so delayed? What is it? Because
but it's too broad. It's too broader. I think what you were speaking specifically to the sewage.
Seem parochial.
No,
Not that I wouldn't want to know about that one too.
No, but it's a very valid and quite frankly, all of us in here are going to raise concerns on those issues that are more. We know more about. Yes, more germane to us. So I have given latitude where that is. But that project has a timeline on it.
Pardon me, the Hellshire sewage?
Pardon?
Hellshire sewage member?
Yes.
Well, one of the things she wants to say is, and again,
I just had a conversation.
Sorry.
You check. No, I think, Member Jackson, I think you may have turned off the mic. Oh, it's on.
Sorry, Abon.
Oh.
One of the things with UDC, it's one of the agencies that is required to be self-financing. So at the beginning of the year, they make their budget based on what they see on the ground as the need, and then they execute as funds become available. So there are times when you may even go to tender, and I don't think it is bad planning, but with good intention. Because, for example, your area, it is something that we know that you are very passionate about, been talking about, and is one area that we would really like to address, but sometimes the funds are just not there because they don't get support from the consolidated funds. So we can program it to say, okay, they have got $2 billion and this is how it will be apportioned. So they're ahead. They make the plans hoping to generate revenue, and sometimes it just does not happen. And we try to prioritize and do even aspects of the important and the critical ones. So sometimes, yes, poor planning at times may chip in. Also, the procurement process may be very lengthy because sometimes you go to tender, then you realize that something was left out and you have to go back over the entire process and so those contribute as well, but their problem primarily has to do with financing.
My heart is not any much comforted, but I would want that information to go to the, not just in my area, but all the affected communities that have the expectations. Disappointment comes from unmet expectation. So where there are challenges, inform and update the schedule so people don't have expectation that it's going to be knock out the water.
And Member Jackson, I want to agree with you, and I think for all agencies, not just UDC, one of the concerns that I have is that a lot of the agencies do not, they have public relations personnel, they have budgets, they have everything. However, when an agency, whether it is water, NWA, etc., have delays or problems in constituencies, many times the constituents are coming to us. And when we are calling and saying, why don't you have meetings, they sort of leave it to the representative. And I think the extent to which we have these projects that impact on hundreds and thousands of persons, there needs to be, and I'm not singling out UDC here, but there needs to be more communication with the communities, the affected parties, the extent to which. And I think, members, one of the things that we need to recommend and one of the things that we must do more is insist that this happens, the communications from the agencies and departments. All right. Members, just a question from your financials. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Member Phillips. I'll wait till then.
Chair, just on two issues, and one will come from the financials, but on the downtown redevelopment, which is something that I think when I was born in 1971, we were talking about it, and we're still talking about it. I know there was a push some time ago in trying to regularize properties. Where are we now with the downtown redevelopment, and is it still under the purview of UDC?
Well, as you know, downtown Kingston is the core of downtown Kingston, the waterfront, is a part of UDC's designated area. And indeed, we have been doing work there. We do have a number of projects in planning at this time to extend the works that we have done. We have work along the waterfront. We're looking at some work behind, some new developments behind, and along the rest of the waterfront that extends out to customs. So we do have some projects in planning there. We also have, we've also been facilitating some other things, including the lease, for example, of the Victoria Pier building, which you will have seen appears to be quite a success. We also have some work we're doing at the other end of the waterfront, where we're working on the planning of UN House at, what was that building?
Headquarters?
Block 24. The old fire brigade building is being redesigned to be the UN or UN House here in Jamaica. We have also had the construction happening at Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade at the far end, the far eastern end of the waterfront. Behind that, there's construction happening at the Grace Kennedy headquarters, which is a land sale facilitated by the UDC. So we make development happen in a variety of ways.
And when I refer to the redevelopment or downtown redevelopment, I'm thinking even coming from the waterfront up, because just when you look at even just for transport sector, parking areas, the derelict buildings downtown, but just a comprehensive. I know that there was an extension of the zone for tax.
Right. So we have a tax incentive program, and we did expand those boundaries. And so, as I said, the way we facilitate is not only by just construction. We facilitate in other ways through tax incentive program, through the lease of lands, through the sale of lands, and through the other projects that we have planned. So we have a number of new projects.
So outside of the
The
waterfront and the development of those new properties.
Right.
What else is really the development? And since we have given that widened area for the tax incentives, have we had any take-up in development in that area?
Yes, we have had.
Yeah, that's what I would like to know.
We have had some interest in our tax incentive program. I think we can speak to that when we speak more about our financials. But yes, there are other areas of planning, and of course, to the northern end of downtown, we are looking at the planning now of the entire government oval area as well, which would be looking at also some redevelopment. That would be in the northern part of downtown Kingston.
All right, and since you have touched on the government oval, what will be the UDC's responsibility in the rollout of the government oval?
The UDC's responsibility at this time is primarily as technical coordinator, and as I suppose as we go forward, we may be involved as project managers as well.
And when you say technical coordinator, meaning?
With coordinating the inputs and doing the initial assessments with the other agencies. So looking at things like infrastructure, which is a key matter there. So looking at what's the current infrastructure there, what are the infrastructure plans of the agencies around, including water, roads, all of the required infrastructure.
Because when I look at your project reports and looking at just the Kingston region, I mean, most of them speaks of us refurbishing of the fish market, the construction of the Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Mm-hmm. But, you know, as I'm trying to find out if there is an overall plan for the redevelopment of downtown, because it is going to be the center. Yes. As you have seen the success of what you have done on the waterfront. But why is it that we're taking so long to do a comprehensive rollout of the redevelopment of downtown?
Well, just to confirm your first question, there is a comprehensive plan. The UDC has looked extensively at all of downtown Kingston for its development. What we're implementing now, of course, what we do is we try to implement the projects that we have the most control over to start. So we are looking at the projects that we can develop on the lands that we have, and we're also facilitating as much as possible others. But there is a plan which we will continue rolling out as we go forward.
And is there a look at that, the transport hub, meaning further in Victoria, north of the park itself, or even is there a plan to look at how it is a transport center for downtown to help to deal with the congestion?
Well, the core transport planning wouldn't fall under the UDC, but we do.
No, but it would.
We do collaborate and support in the overall planning and the facilitation of that.
All right, Member Campbell.
Well, just one more. Just looking at the appendix number 2 of their report of June 30th, unaudited financial reports, and looking at the receivables report, Ministry of Health jumped out at me, 175. This is $1 million, right?
Yes, $175 million.
And this is for rental?
This is for rental when they...
that would be for Oceana. Is that Oceana?
When the ministry...
Downtown?
Sorry. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. This represents unpaid rental by the Ministry of Health when they occupied the Oceana.
Yeah.
They moved out of the Oceana and had this outstanding amount. We are in constant dialogue at this point in time with the ministry to see if we can
Ministry of Finance.
The board has requested that we continue the dialogue with the Ministry of Health. So we are...
But you have written to the Ministry of Finance?
Yes, we are in dialogue as well.
But most of your receivables, and this is coming from mainly government agencies.
Correct.
In this
That's
document
correct.
that you have here. Huh?
Well, the majority of our buildings downtown is occupied by government agencies.
Yeah, but and your income stream comes mainly from project management, rental.
Correct.
So your inability then to do projects is because you are not able to collect what is owed to you then.
Correct. It impacts it.
And I would imagine that impacts it greatly. No, and the reason why Madam PS, is because, again, with our remit to look at your current budget and the appropriations, looking at how it is that you get to operate. And if it is that we are asking questions on your inability to execute projects, and the length of time that it is, and the explanation of the PS is looking at your budget in any particular year and seeing what it is that you can fund. And if it is that you're owed over $364 million. Yes, I see it. I will need to tell them to pay. Right? No, but on a serious note, if you're owed so much money, and you're not able to complete projects, and I always say that delaying a project costs more at the end of the day, is that first and foremost is that government needs to pay its bill to the organization. A couple of years ago, you had to be disposing of assets to gain some revenue so that you can execute some of that work that you are doing. And so, you know, Chairman, it would be of concern that government in itself, the non-collection of debt from government entities.
Members, one of the things that we could probably do here is just ask the UDC to give us a list of the government debt from government agencies, because it's taken from one pocket and put into
it is here.
No. I'm just saying for us to refer that in our report back to Parliament, just for the Ministry of Finance, because it really is an accounting issue, because both are receiving subventions from the same person. So it is. All right. I have Member Campbell. Yes.
This is. I heard the plans you have for the redevelopment of downtown. I'm particularly concerned about sewage. And I saw some reports which bothers me. On just Monday of this week, I spoke with the head of the sewage treatment plant in St. Catherine. And I'm not sure, well, I have to take his word that that entity is really at its capacity now.
Sorry, which entity?
The one over in St. Catherine. What's it called?
Soapberry?
Soapberry.
Okay.
Yes, it's at its right. But I suppose there's an interagency agreement, or well, I don't know what. What is it that is being done? Because that is going to impact your ability to execute on a number of these projects, because if NWC in and around Kingston doesn't have the sewage treatment capacity, and Soapberry is saying that it's really up there now, I just really want to know if there's the discussion going on as to an extension of Soapberry, and if not, how do you propose to develop downtown without having the treatment capabilities?
Our planning always is in collaboration with other agencies, particularly agencies that would manage other key infrastructure. So in our planning, we do speak with. One of the first things to initiate planning is a discussion about sewage. Sewage and water, roads and drainage are the key parts of infrastructure to support any development. So one of the things the first things we do in any planning is to determine what is the existing sewage and what would be proposed. And I don't have the details of it, but I do know that the NWC is currently reviewing all of the plans for the sewage for downtown Kingston and its conveyance to Soapberry, and I think an expansion of Soapberry is being contemplated.
All right. Well, I have a follow-up question, and well, let me just ask the follow-up questions first. Member Phillips had raised 2 points, and just from our brief, I'm just checking on something here. Given on your financials, you just say for the period April to June 2018, it says the UDC reported that operating revenue totaled 588 million compared to the 780 million budgeted. And this resulted in a negative variance of 192 million, of which 164 million was attributed to the shortfall in revenues from operations managed by SADCO. Is this something that you have looked into, or is this?
Yeah, yes, Chairman. It's something we, at the time when we were doing the budget, we had anticipated increased revenues from the Florida Cruise Shipping Association, increase in the rate, the US dollar rate. However,
is the mic on?
Oh. Yeah.
No, mine can go both. It can.
Yes, as we had budgeted, we had anticipated that this revenue would have tripped in. But we had several negotiations with the cruise ships, and they have deferred that increase. That increase will take effect starting this winter.
And in November for the...
Yeah, in this November.
It's going to be an increase. So that has gone out already? The increase has been negotiated and gone out already?
But it will be going in phases.
Yes.
So there will be some coming in now, and the rest will phase into the rest of next year.
So it would start, obviously, I think probably either 1st of October or 1st of November.
Yeah, round about 1st of October.
And the increase, you want to give us a number or
it's
percentage?
It's approximate. We had asked for $5.
Yes.
Moving from 15 to 20.
Yeah.
It's now being phased, and the first $2.50 will become due now, and then the rest will become phased over the next year.
All right. So a lot of this is going to be deferred earnings.
Yes.
All right. All right. Members, if we have no more questions, the one thing that I would like, we have heard various things. I don't know that we can have a long discussion, but there are a number of UDC properties. I don't know if you have any who are openly for divestment now, whether that is out there or you propose to do anything, any divestment of properties at this point in time?
There is a list of, I don't have the list before me, but there is a list that went to Cabinet to ask for approval, because we had gotten the directive to divest X percentage of the non-productive, 20% of those assets that were not productive. And ads were placed, but I don't have the details before me, but they probably could provide the details. I know that one in particular was advertised and there was no take-up, no response.
That would have been?
I think it's Sunset? Success. But we can provide...
Success Beach. Yes.
The property. But we could provide the, we have it here.
Is that a beach or property? Or is a property with a beach?
Correct. It's property, but there's some beachfront.
Okay, got you.
But we have a list, Chairman, that we
All
could
right.
share.
Well, what may be useful, I don't think we have to go into it, but just for the committee, if we could get a list of those that are proposed and those expressions of interest that you may have in the properties, so that we have a basic idea, and what you expect to realize from these properties may be useful.
Yeah.
All right, members. Well, I'm about to release.
The last time you were here, PS, a passing question was asked regarding the general manager of UDC. It was early days then, and you had indicated you would apprise yourself further. Mr. Chairman, I asked this question against the ongoing concern that I've been expressing in this committee regarding the untimely separation of persons. We don't know much about it, but I will say, and I know other members will share the concern as to whether or not, or what the circumstances that relate to this untimely separation and the relevance of it, the pertinence of it. We know in our organization, rapid turnover of critical personnel impacts significantly on the efficiency of the organization and being able to do its work properly, separate and apart from any other reasons that may contribute to such any improper separation. So it is within that context. I ask for any update that the PS could provide, and I ask it against the background too of I know that one of the subsidiary entity of the UDC, SADCO in particular, has formally requested the sacking of the general manager of UDC. I don't know if that is the basis on which it took place or not.
Member Jackson, let me suggest, I think that from the committee's perspective, they obviously will have concerns, but I don't think everything can be sort of brought here. There will be issues. I would allow the PS if she has anything she would wish to say on the matter, but I think that within the context of it, we will have to wait till there's a more official,
first of all, Chairman,
a more official perspective on it.
I just want to put it on record that I have no knowledge, no information on any directive that was given by SADCO to fire the former general manager. I'm not aware of it. And at the last sitting where it came up, I did say that I would speak in more detail with the chairman. I also spoke with the former general manager, and that's as far I probably think would want to take it.
All right, I think okay, Member Phillips.
I just want. I think this would be UDC and NEPA, Helsha Beach. The beach where you have leased to the fishing village. We're having who owns that property? Bought the property?
Helsha was subdivided many years ago, and they cut off the Helsha Beach, and was given to the fishermen formed a cooperative. So there's a Half Moon Beach cooperative that owns that section.
All right.
UDC only owns Fort Clients.
Okay, no, thanks. But then to NEPA, then seeing the
no, hold on. I would like to just finish. Members, we have an issue there. The House has requested that we adjourn at before 2, and they also want to do some work. Obviously have some issues with the equipment. What I would like, members, is as much as possible to complete with certainly UDC. I don't want us to be in here for more than about 15-20 more minutes, and I just want to get just clear with members. So I don't know if there's anything else that was being asked of UDC? No? All right. So, well, we're only going to be a short while longer, so I wouldn't, if we could just wait for the 10 or 15 minutes. The question now, members, if we can move quickly, because I really would like us, if we could, to finish with this ministry today. I'm certain the PS.
In a spirit of cooperation with you, Chair, I would want to perhaps ask of the UDC. It's related to the question that the member from Northwest Manchester asked in respect of Elsha Beach, but related is the UDC's property along the Elsha Main Road that has been the subject of massive erosion, and no intervention is being made to avoid losing the main road from the roundabout for Fort Clarence to the Elsha Beach roundabout. There has been a massive erosion that is now threatening the roadway, and it is in UDC's interest because of all its investments that it has in Elsha. If the main road is not protected, if their property's erosion is not altered, then not only the existing residents are affected, but all the new developments which are currently. And I know NEPA is very much apprised of this. I've made my own intervention with the Half Moon fishermen with the cooperation of NEPA and some amount of cooperation from UDC too in terms of the boulders which are being used to resurrect the groin to avoid the erosion or reduce the erosion along the fishermen's cooperative operated Elsha Beach area. But outside of the Elsha Beach area is the main road which links Fort Clarence to that side, is commanding of immediate attention.
All right, so members, I'd like to thank UDC.
The General Manager was about to respond.
You have reopened.
I note your concern, sir. We will investigate and we will do whatever we can to. We wouldn't want to lose any of our land either. Okay.
All right. There was a suggestion. Were there any questions? If we may now move on to Member Phillips' suggestion was you were asking a question. It was of NEPA.
NEPA.
So let me just, members, I'd like to ask you. I really, if we could, we are under a time constraint. If it is at all possible, I really would like to finish. If we hit anything that is of real concern, then we may be forced to come back. But I'd really like to release PS once and for all. So I would move over now to NEPA. Tonight, welcome. And just if you have any a quick brief, we're trying our best. I noticed the Marshal is trying to get the attention, but I am proceeding. You have to move the big mic.
Let me move.
All right, and members, I would ask that as much as possible if we can be.
No, right.
Thank you.
Come, Leonard.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon to members, colleagues. Elsha Beach, Chairman. Let me.
I would allow you. No, I would allow you to sort if you had some general comments because we're really hoping that we can.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. We at the National Environment and Planning Agency, we continue to pursue the work that we have set out in our strategic action plan, in our 3-year corporate plan, as well as our yearly operational plan. We still maintain the 8 broad strategic objectives, and we have for this financial year 2018-19 12 key performance indicators. We have a number of major issues we are seeking to have settled. The one is to have the country with full development orders. We are almost there. We are pursuing the preparation of the National Spatial Plan. As you know, we are heavily involved with the development application review process. Our performance, I would say, is extremely well. We are turning out somewhere in the region of 76% of our applications in less than 90 days. And as I speak about applications, I must pause to say we could do much better with our application review, except that we have a major issue that I've raised in a number of fora with the quality of submissions we receive and the quality of the submissions from the professionals involved in the development application review process. Just this morning I missed a major event because of that very issue. Sitting with developers and consultants to go through basic submission requirements that professionals should be aware of. We are also tasked now, Chairman, with implementing the government's announced policy on the ban on plastics and styrofoam. And we are also working for the final consideration with the deposit refund scheme, that is for PET bottles. We have some specific development areas that we are looking at, that we are working on, and I don't want to bore you with those, but we are doing that work also. When I spoke about the development orders, I should really recognize the support PSUL as well as the Chief Parliamentary Council we have received from both the PS and the Chief Parliamentary Council, and it has assisted us to be further along the way with what we are doing. I have with me today Mr. Ainsworth Carroll, who is the Director of Planning, Projects, Evaluation, Monitoring and Research, Gregory Bennett, who is our Director, Application Management Division, and Mr. Leonard Francis, who is our Director of Spatial Planning. I had 2 other directors here, but had to leave for different issues. May I now answer the question on Hellshire, please, Chairman? So specifically as it relates to Hellshire, Hellshire Beach is experiencing major erosion over the year. It is getting worse, as we know. Not sure if you are aware that the erosion is due to man-made factors. Persons building on the sand dunes, interrupting the normal interchange between the sea and the land. Certain MP who is in this room has been very concerned about the developments at Hellshire and the deterioration. We have hosted him in the agency many times. We have hosted him with fishermen, with fisher folks, to discuss the issues. We have sought to identify funding solutions with the Member of Parliament and his team. And we continue. I know that the MP was looking to TEF for some support. He can speak for himself. But we have gone through the empirical data as to what is impacting Hellshire Beach. We have done all the studies. We know what the reasons are. We have developed a report. We have gone to the Beach Control Authority, which is also the Natural Resources Conservation Authority. And there is a draft cabinet submission, as PS will tell you, that the Environmental Management and Risk Management Division is looking at. We want to go to cabinet. The NRCA Beach Control Authority has signed off on what the proposed solutions are to go to cabinet. It is going to require funding, but that's a matter for cabinet to consider.
You finish, Member Phillips, Member Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. All right, I just have one concern as it relates to environment risk management, and you touched on the erosion of the Hellshire Beach, and certainly some of our other beaches have now been plagued by erosion. The overfishing of the parrotfish, I know that it must be cross-agency and cross-ministries, etc. But when we look at some of the things that NEPA is responsible for, and we look at the development and the development and improvement of recreational land, and we look at your coastal water management, and we look at as it relates to high-risk facilities and habitats and everything else. I observed recently there was one restaurant in particular who advertised, parrotfish, come and get your yummy parrotfish. And this is within the last 2 weeks. And, an environmentalist or a concerned Jamaican made a comment to say, but, aren't we moving to ban parrotfish? And haven't we heard about the environmental concerns and the effect the parrotfish has on the environment and the role it plays in preserving our coastlines, in preserving our beaches, and in preserving the natural habitat, for so many other species? What can we as Jamaicans look forward to hearing from NEPA? What kind of sanctions are going to be put in place? What kind of what kind of measures are being worked on between you and, let's say, agriculture, fisheries, etc. And also, what kind of educational campaign can we come up with? Because it really is important, and I'm very happy that the government is now taking an interest in what happens to small island development states, taking an interest in banning styrofoam, taking an interest in climate change, and I think it is very, very important. Recently the Prime Minister has been invited to several functions across the world to speak on these issues, and it's major when a small country like Jamaica is being given that recognition as being one of the key players in the world on issues such as these. And so I think it's now time that we translate that international goodwill into taking very, very serious measures to protect our beaches, to protect our coastlines, to protect the natural habitat of persons, and also to send a very strong signal, whether it's going to be through educational campaigns or serious penalties this time, as it relates to the overfishing of the parrotfish. Jamaicans must take notice, and as parliamentarians, we're all responsible to ensure that Jamaica itself and that things that relate to our natural culture and heritage are preserved for the prosperity of future generations. So what are your plans going forward? Strong plans.
Thank you, Member. The ban on parrotfish has been considered, discussed, debated, and in fact almost reached the point of going for a policy position. But I recall vividly, I think it was last year, or as recently as last year, the Beach Control Authority, NRCA, did come to a position, and we invited the Fisheries Division, which is now in MICAF, to join us with the discussions. And Fisheries Division was not of the view that a straightforward ban was what was required. There were a number of issues that fisheries placed on the table for the consideration of the NRCA. I don't have them in my head now, but fisheries being the authority on this issue, the NRCA did yield to fisheries, because you'll recall, you will know that fisheries division are the division that is on the ground with the fishermen that are doing the measurements, etc., net size, and all of these issues. It is also a cultural issue. I know that that is one of the issues. There are a number of persons who only enjoy the parrotfish. Personally, I don't eat parrotfish, but it's a cultural issue. Persons want the parrotfish. And so it presents a major challenge for us. I could get for you, I could pull those deliberations between the NRCA, Beach Control Authority, and Fisheries on the discussions on the ban, and I could make that available
members,
for you.
Please. Yeah, all right. Members, we have a challenge. Well, thank you, Mr. Knight. 1 second. We have a challenge. It is now almost 20 minutes to 2. The Marshal is asking that we proceed. Now, I'd really hoped that we could finish, but I've noticed that Member Daly has a question, Member Phillips, Member Campbell. So and Member Jack, we're running into a problem. So I'm seeking guidance from the committee as to, because I had hoped that we could say that we could, because I don't think there's much, but as it stands now, with the time, we're going to have to do one of two things. If there are, what I would like to ask members, there are some questions. I think National Land Agency is here. We have two options. Option number 1 is for members to table the questions they may have. We get those results, and based on that, if it is necessary to ask them to come again, we do so, or for the next sitting, which would be after the retreat, if we ask them to come earlier, we just dispatch with them and move on. So I seek guidance, members.
And I think, because Chair, I was just looking through what was sent. I mean, the information I was going to ask was really on an update on the spatial plan and the rollout. Yeah. So if we could, just as a question, so for them to send a report on that in particular.
So, all right, members, what I'm going to ask members is that I'm going to say to the secretary to the committee, if she could, if members have any questions, could we put them in writing, and could you make a request in the group for members, and we do the same for both NEPA and Land Agency, and whatever responses come in, we can put them before the committee and take it from there.
Order in that regard. For the benefit of my colleague, that is a decision of the committee. Just so they're aware that it's in keeping with the circular.
All right. Now, just one other thing. Members, given the urgency of the discussions this morning, there are a number of things. Number 1, the retreat. I'm going to suggest, given that the 31st has conflicts, that we do our retreat for next week, if the House is able to make.
Next week, Wednesday afternoon, Internal and External Affairs Committee meet at 2.
So we can meet at 10. So we can meet at 10 if there's nothing in the morning.
If you meet, but by the time you figure we can finish in 3 hours, that retreat. That is all right, members. But I'm going to need, if we're going to do this, I'm going to need your cooperation. Often when we send out the request, we do not get replies, and then when we finally take a decision, it is not. But I'm just saying, if it is not, Tuesdays and Wednesdays tend to be difficult days. But let us see. I will have to put out to the committee. What I would like, if it is possible, to get one member from each side to work with me on it, can convey, and let's see if we can pull it together. Member Campbell is very
No. Terry Long, you won't get any decision.
Well, I think Member Campbell is where. Member Phillips will help with that.
No. You want decision. He won't cause any decision.
Either I'm easy. You
say Member Jackson and Member Campbell.
And I would agree.
And note that it's a decision of the committee.
Yes, I note. Secondly, members, we have, please, let me just put this. On Tuesday coming, I intend to take the balance of the reports on the table and have a discussion. One of the reports we're taking is the Ministry of National Security, which had 2 sittings, and there are 2 reports. But we had not completed that discussion. I've asked the Secretary to give us whatever correspondence. We're going to have to, in discussing it, it's my intention to table the reports and just indicate where we are at with regard to those discussions. But at that point, we will terminate the backlog. I have spoken to the leader of government business and indicated for this committee to operate to its optimal efficiency. What we're going to need now is that we will generate the reports in a timely manner and for them to be debated. We are debating reports from July 2016. We want to have those reports within the session. So, to that end, members, I'm going to ask that the technical staff put together the report on the deliberations. The last deliberations we would have had would have been the Ministry of Energy, Technology, etc., and with the Ministry of Economic Growth. For us to get both of those reports, and I suggest that on the day of the retreat, that we have a discussion amongst the members about that report and recommendations, because it will be a fairly big report, and let us deal with that. And the last point, the agenda. We have an agenda that had been set from early this year. I am going to ask the Secretary to pass it out again to all members, and at the same time that we do that, we can at the retreat have a discussion about it and how we will treat with that. So members, I don't know if everyone's in agreement with the plan of action going forward. Are we, members, do I have the concurrence of the committee? All right, thank you. Well, then the only thing left for me on your behalf is to thank Pierce, as promised. So thank you, and thank you, team. To the NLA, I'm sorry we were not able. I know you're disappointed, but but we will seek any questions. The NEPA, if there are any further questions, they will be put in writing. In terms of the UDC, there were some outstanding questions, certainly on the divestment, etc. And to the clerk, there was a follow-up question for the Universal Service Fund for the reporting that we had put in place. On that note, members, thank you for attending. P.S. Thank you, and thank you to the staff of the House. With that, this committee is now adjourned.
keep we island clean. So clean. From the streets to the beach. So clean. No dirty up Jamaica. Please don't do it.
No dash, no paper, no dash, no plastic. Dispose your garbage responsibly. No know how to recycle, learn it quick, and if you drop it back